3 o'clock. We're going to call this special meeting of the Municipal Council of the Corporation of the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal to order. And the second item on the agenda is approval of the agenda as presented. Can I have a mover, please?
So moved.
Councillor Cameron and seconded by Councillor Hunter. Those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. And the next item on the agenda?
The motions were actually pre-assigned.
Motion's pre-assigned? Okay, well,
So,
who's got the motion for the approval of the
I've got a
agenda?
copy, is that?
Everyone should have one on their desk that was pre-assigned.
I didn't have anything on my desk.
No.
I'm just for adjourn though.
The meetings today, gentlemen.
I didn't. I never touched anything, I promise.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, so I have a mover and a seconder, Cameron and Hunter.
Let's, I think we have to redo it. Or,
Just
can I
just go ahead, go ahead.
give that to you and you sign it? Have no one sign it? Still doesn't.
Yep. Well, I can do it. Cameron and Hunter. All right, yep. Next item on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Are there any disclosures there this evening?
No.
None. All right, item 4 on the agenda, delegation and presentation. Of course, that's why we're here, to hear a little bit about this proposed service delivery review to be conducted by WSCS Consulting, Inc., which I see the two names are Tammy Carruthers and Angela Gravel. So welcome, ladies, and I'll let you just go ahead from there.
Great.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, first of all, thank you very much for having us here this evening and kicking off this important project. We are going to ask you to do a little bit of work this evening as well. So I wanted to go over a little bit in terms of the service delivery review, so an introduction. We'll introduce ourselves as well as how we're going to undertake this project, and then we're going to facilitate a SWOT analysis with council, and then obviously open it up for questions. First and foremost, thank you to the township for awarding this contract to us. WSCS Consulting is pretty local. We're based out of Perth, so probably one of the shortest commutes that we have. And we've been around since the year 2000. We do provide a very wide range of consulting services, service delivery reviews, business process improvements, Lean Six Sigma. We also do quite a bit in terms of technology reviews and financial and asset management plan. We are a small firm, and what we do is we tend to, depending on the project, we'll partner with a variety of consulting firms. So, for example, when we work on asset management, we will use Four Roads Consulting. We've got the Ontario Municipal Leadership Institute, the Policy Shop, etc. So we try to keep ourselves small, low overhead, which allows us to keep being fairly competitive. So our consultants that are on this project, of course, myself, Tammy Carruthers, I'm the lead consultant and the project manager. You will see me most of the time. One of the things about our firm is that we don't send out people, juniors, out to our projects. So I've had about 25 years in the public sector, and then I went on to consult about 12 years ago. Federal, provincial, and then I was the Director of Finance and IT for the County of Lanark, and which of course is rural in nature as well, just like the township. So I have Angela Gravel here today. She's the Executive Director with the Ontario Municipal Leadership Institute. We partner quite a bit in terms of delivering training, and she's got 30 some odd years in the municipal sector at the city of Burlington and the town of Milton. Her focus is going to be on the clerk's area, governance, bylaw, building, planning, community development, and the fire service. Not with us today, but with us in spirit are our other consultants. So we've got Kelly Stilling, who is a IT consultant, and he's a former counselor. He used to be a counselor with the city of Rossland in British Columbia. So he kind of sees both sides of the fence, so to speak. He's also an IT expert, so he'll be looking at your systems from a long-term perspective and some potential for additional functionality perhaps, integrations, those kinds of things. And he also has municipal background as well with the city of Whitehorse. So way out in the Yukon, which, believe it or not, is actually very similar to what we deal with here. So, and then we've got Dave Anderson, who will be he's with Four Roads Consulting. He's also got a significant background in the municipal sector. His focus was on, he had been the former Director of Public Works, asset management operations, so he'll be focusing on that area and facilities. Jawad Kasab, who is a lawyer by trade, and he'll also be assisting in terms of bylaw planning and parks and recreation. And then Emily Harris, who is our policy guru, who is going to focus on finance and policy review. So they are, like I said, not here today, but are here in spirit. So in terms of the service delivery review, really it's an opportunity for the township to look at your services, improve, potentially find ways to improve services and focus on some of the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. I know that in the RFP, like many municipalities, struggling with meeting all of the demands, infrastructure requirements. So most importantly for us, we always focus on the customer backwards. So in other words, looking at what the customer needs and how can we improve services from a customer perspective. Ultimately, looking at ways to be more efficient and also be able to still meet the demands. And looking at, you are growing, you've got some interesting projects underway, so you are growing. You're going to have increased requirements from your customers, so certainly look from that perspective. We will look at ways for improving service delivery approaches, so mechanisms and your processes. So once we've got to go through a process whereby we've identified all the services that you provide, looking at some of the back-end processes. And I think we are unique in that way because of our background. Process, when you're looking at processes, there are a variety of things that are being done that perhaps doesn't need to be done that way. Perhaps it's been done for 30 years that way. This is an opportunity to take a look at things from an objective perspective. And so, interestingly enough, we do quite a large amount of business process reviews. So we've collected, I'm at an inventory of processes in excess of 3,000 in municipalities. They're very complex. Municipalities are probably the most complex businesses that exist today. I always say that if we look at the private sector, there's very few private sector organizations that have 10 different types of lines of business that are totally different. So we've been, over time, collecting these inventory of processes. So not only are we going to look at your services, we're going to look at how the back end of those processes are being delivered so that we can hopefully be able to find ways that you can improve those processes without hindering service or hopefully even improving those services. Addressing competing priorities, of course, municipalities are always stretched to do that. There's obviously currently, of course, a push from our other funders in terms of the provincial government to look at new ways to do things and be able to address those competing priorities. And I know infrastructure is one of those areas that all municipalities are struggling meeting the requirements around infrastructure renewal. So, and then are there opportunities to increase revenue streams, reduce costs? And so those are the key functions that we'll be looking at. So. We utilize the approach that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing put out probably, I guess it's maybe 7 or 8 years ago now, which focuses really on 10 crucial questions in looking at the service. So, number one being, is the service, once we've done this service inventory, do these services meet the needs of the citizens? So there might be services you're providing that you no longer need to provide, there might be services that you should be providing that you're not providing. So do they actually meet the citizens' requirements? Secondly, what do the citizens expect of the services? So what we'll be doing there is looking at, from a customer perspective, what is the expectation around the service? And when I say that, it's not just, there's usually what we call 2 to 3 typical critical to quality things we look at. Response times are often, citizens expect people to be responded to in a reasonable time frame. Accuracy, consistency, those are the types of things that typically citizens would expect from the services. So lots of times the citizens aren't very happy to see us, whether it's bylaw officers and those kinds of things. So we're not expecting that services will necessarily make citizens happy, but the things that they expect in terms of response time, that kind of thing, we'll definitely look at. So those are a bit of a requirement around gathering some performance metrics and being able to measure that against what the expectations would be. And that really leads to the third question that we look at. So how does this current performance compare to what the citizens expect? Now, my understanding from this scope is that there's not necessarily a survey going to citizens at this time, but that doesn't mean we won't know what citizens are saying. So that's partly why we want to talk with you, because you are representing the citizens. But also one of the things that we like to do is we like to actually sit at the front desk. Because the front desk is going to tell us all kinds of things about what people are hearing. So it might, it's not necessarily that you're only hearing complaints. We want to hear about what the citizens are asking you to do, because that is an indicator. And obviously the people that work here every day also hear what the citizens ask, request, complain, are happy about. So we'll utilize the various methods to find out how your citizens, what their expectations are. And so we'll do that in a variety of ways. And any other service reviews that you've done, that you've gathered information, obviously we'll review that as well. The next thing is to be able to say, are we doing the activities, or is the township actually doing the activities that lead to the results that you're trying to achieve? So, for example, and I'm not saying this is true or not, but if you're looking at something like economic development, I'll use that one. What do we tend to do to try to develop economic development? Well, a lot of times we'll find out that municipalities will say, well, we're going to go to a bunch of trade shows. So they'll say, yeah, we're going to go to 10 trade shows and we're going to try to promote the township. Well, do those activities actually lead to what you're trying to do? And so it's looking at it from an outcome perspective. I'm not saying trade shows are good or bad or indifferent, but are you doing the things that are likely going to lead to the outcomes that you're trying to achieve? And so that's really what that is looking at. So that's really when we start to look at a service. Okay, when we're looking at a service like economic development, what are all the activities that you're doing to try to promote economic development, as an example? And then the fifth question being, how is the demand being managed? So that's really looking at the management of the work. This is not management of the people. Okay, very important. We're not here to determine the management of the people. We're talking about being able to understand the demand and how is it being managed. So often we find when we go into municipalities, unfortunately, we don't even know what the demand is going to be. So sometimes we don't have the tools in place to be able to anticipate demand. And yet, really, we probably have the information we need. And so sometimes it means that we have to give different types of tools to do that. So whether it's historical information, whether it's looking at your neighbors, those are kind of indicators of the types of demand that you might have. So, and even if you look at something like winter control, I mean, we clearly every year we're going to have a different snow accumulation, we're gonna have ice storms, we're gonna have all kinds of things like that. How are we managing it in terms of a longer term perspective? So we'll definitely gather that. Question 6 we look at is, are the services and required assets sustainable over the long term? So, as all municipalities, of course, now have to put together asset management plans. We're forced to do what's right, I guess. But do you have the required assets to actually manage the service? So, a lot of times we'll find, we're gonna put in new programs, but then we don't actually have the assets in place to be able to manage those programs. And so are they sustainable? And so really now we're pushing it out to a longer term approach. 7, then we'll start looking at, can the benefits or the outcomes be increased? So this is really using the same resources or less resources. Are there ways that we can actually improve the service and the ultimate outcomes that we're trying to achieve for each service type? Of course, looking at more efficient, lower cost, and when we say that, that could be a combination of a variety of things. Lower cost doesn't necessarily mean reduced number of staff. It may be that we're looking at things from whether it be shared services, whether it be different procurement methodologies. There's all kinds of things that could be done to be able to improve the service or reduce the costs. And are there alternate ways to deliver the service? So just because our customers, our citizens want us to do things, it doesn't necessarily mean the municipality has to do it. It could be a partnership, it could be community groups, all of those things that are there different ways that we can provide the service. And I know that you've been doing some work with your other partner neighboring municipalities on that basis as well. So that's really what that's looking at, are there different ways that we could provide the service. And then this is the big thing. How do we balance what we're doing today against what planning tomorrow? And this is always a challenge because, and this is a personal experience thing. When we tried to put in a reserve policy as an example at the County of Lanark, we ran into the challenge, well, how much are you going to tax today's taxpayers for something tomorrow, and vice versa. So it's looking at that long-term approach. There's always got to be some kind of balance, and we call that intergenerational equity. So we want to look at things from both a current, what do we have to do today, till sort of a long term. So that's really what we're going to focus on. Our approach, I'll just go through it quickly here because it was in the proposal. I'm sorry it looks a little small there on the screen. The first part, which is of course why we're here today, is most of what we're going to do in the next month and a half is first seek to understand you. So in other words, pulling together all of the documentation in terms of plans and results, performance indicators within the municipality, analyze all of the existing service plans. So you have an official plan, you have an economic development strategy, any other operational plans. So that's our first seek to understand. We're here today to do a SWOT analysis, look at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and we'll do that with you as council, and then we're going to have a session with staff and management tomorrow as well. Sometimes this might have been done in a different, for a different strategy, but we want to look at it from where are you today, where you feel that you're from an internal perspective that you have some strengths, or where are some of the weaknesses you see for moving forward long term, and then externally, what are some of the opportunities that you have as a township to be able to move forward, and of course threats, which often come from other levels of government and climate change and all kinds of other things, so we'll explore that. Then we're going to go through a series of consultations, and you haven't heard from me yet, but you'll would like to have individual interviews with each counselor, to give you an opportunity to talk to us individually, and of course, with staff and management as well, which is starting tomorrow. So, and then that consultation process will include gathering up all of the services that are provided by the township. From an inventory perspective, what are the services, what are the benchmarks that we're going to use in order to determine where you are today and where you'd like to be. And then we will benchmark against some other municipalities of similar size and makeup. Now, I'm always gonna say this to every council, there is no other township that's like Edwardsburg Cardinal. So we always have to be very careful. And every time I get asked to benchmark against another municipality, we always have to be very clear about the assumptions behind them. Because every municipality is just a little bit different in terms of the types of services, the demographics, all of those kinds of things. So they are good for providing you with potential opportunities and some benchmarks, but the underlying, or I would say the denominator is different. So we are very careful when we do benchmarking to say, this, and of course only so much of it is public information in the sense of being able to analyze it. So yes, we will use some benchmarks of similar size, but we're, as I said, we're always very careful about that. We'll do some research in terms of your data and from an analytical perspective. And then we will evaluate the current as its state. So basically what'll happen is once we've gathered the information about each one of your services, we'll look at them from as they are today and evaluate them in terms of where are some of the areas that perhaps are root causes for some of your challenges. We will throughout the consultations, we'll be interacting with staff as well on that basis, and then come up with looking at some opportunities. So we'll facilitate a session where we're going to say this is where these are our findings. These are some of the potential opportunities that we think that are available to the township to improve, and sort of gauge as a bit of a gauging process to say, yeah, that sounds good, not sure if that's gonna work. And it doesn't mean that it's still not out there, it just might be a longer term potential improvement opportunity. And then of course we'll have a draft report, which I did watch your YouTube when you asked whether or not you'd have an opportunity to ask the consultants about the report. So obviously, yes. I mean, if there is, you'll get a draft report, we'll get a presentation, we'll do a working session with you to say, yeah, we think that's a great idea. Maybe we missed something. Hopefully we've been able to capture what you desired, but it'll give you an opportunity also to say, Tammy, go off and try, find out about this, and that's fine. It's totally fine. It's going to be, the most important thing for us is that this is going to be something that's going to provide you with a roadmap for some change. So, in terms of potential opportunities. So, it's going to be your report at the end of the day. And of course, we'll, as part of the any change that we're recommending, we'll provide what the impact would be on the municipality. So, and things that we see that would be a natural step progression that you would need to do to be able to implement any of those recommendations. So, pretty aggressive schedule, as you'll see. I always say to the client, I hope you're up for it, because we do need staff time, obviously, so that's kind of an important piece. So we certainly have been given that. Is it appropriate to ask any questions on the process at this point from council?
Anybody?
Actually, I may as well get them out now. In your estimation, how long is this going to take to complete? I see you've got November written down
Yeah.
here, but, so it should be ready for us in December?
Yes, correct, yes.
And you're going to look at things such as the software we're using and all of the bells and whistles that
Absolutely,
we have.
yeah,
That's all I have, thank you.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Councilor Finn.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
When you're gonna make different recommendations of improvement and stuff, are you gonna give us a cost analysis of what it's gonna cost us to do these improvements?
Absolutely, yes, Councilor, yeah, of course. Yeah, and that's really what the impact study would be from that perspective. And how long we would suggest it would take, like, I've had some councils, say to me, okay, well, we've got this, a roadmap, well, we want it all done in a year. Well, I'll actually say, I don't think it's reasonable to have it done in a year, because when you look at the capacity within the municipality, if it's gonna be successful, you gotta be able to have it, an appropriate amount of time.
So basically, when you're given the cost analysis, you're gonna have it broke down in segments, okay? If you do this over 4 years, it's gonna be so much, but if you cram it into 2 years, it's gonna cost you that much more, and what the savings would be in between
Yeah,
if we do something quicker, if it's gonna
Sure.
cost us more, but, or we'd save more by doing it quicker, or?
for sure, yeah, if that's appropriate for the particular recommendation, and also will, the prerequisites around some of them as well, so, yeah, thank you. Okay, so this is where we need you to work. It's not all just fun and games. So we do want to go through a SWOT analysis with you. Like I said, Edwardsburg Cardinal is not like any other township, so it's not like I can cookie cut this. We need to understand how your municipality operates, where you think the areas are that you are very strong, where you think you might have some internal weaknesses. This is sometimes hard to be able to go down into your gut and recognize you've got weaknesses, but it's very important because those are all often where the opportunities lie for improvement. And then externally threats. So I'm not sure if the township has ever done a SWOT before.
Through the mayor, it's been done as part of an economic development strategy, but I'm not sure an entire organization's SWOT analysis was done. We did do a service delivery review in 2009, I think it was, but I can't recall what that is from.
And of course, some of the councilors were here and some were new.
That's right.
So really what we want to do is look at realistically what are some of our weaknesses in terms, and this is internal typically, weaknesses that the township might have, and some threats which tend to be external threats to the municipality. Internally, what are some of the strengths that we're going to be able to build on, and what are some of the opportunities which may be external. So this will help us to look at potential opportunities and areas where we might run into some challenges. So why we want to use one, it's really so we have a full awareness of your situation from a strategic perspective. So it's going to help guide us in this review. So what we want to look at is when thinking of the positive, the internal factors, is what does Edwardsburg Cardinal do well? Those are really what our strengths are. What can we improve on? So these are really our weaknesses or some negatives. What can we improve on in terms of service delivery service deliveries? From an external, what are some of the opportunities? So things that we can take advantage of that perhaps we haven't in the past. And threats, so some of these negative scenarios, situations, events that could, that perhaps you should avoid, or things that might hinder your success in making some change in terms of service delivery. So what are we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna do some work here. So What I want you to be thinking about when you're thinking about internal, i.e. strengths and weaknesses, they are typically shown by things like the human resources, physical resources that you have, so assets, financial resources, the types of activities and processes that the township uses, and of course, past experiences. So that's really some of the internal strengths and weaknesses we want to talk about. From an external perspective, so opportunities and threats usually look at things like future trends. So obviously some of the things that pop up to my mind are some of the mega trends, which can be both opportunities and threats. So driverless cars, everybody's talking about driverless cars. We have mega trends that are occurring across the country in terms of urbanization. We have obviously our demographics are changing. Those are some of the future trends that we're starting to see. The economy, you know, when we look at trade wars, it could be positive, negative, those kinds of things. Funding sources, of course, other levels of government. We've got another election coming up. Those are some of the things that come to mind that might impact you externally. Physical environment, climate change, all of those external things that are occurring to us. Legislative requirements, local, national, international events. So that's really when we think of external, what we're looking at. So Vanna.
Have a new name now, do I?
So we're gonna actually ask you to do some work here, counselors and Mayor. We want you to think about your strengths, and our strengths we're gonna put on blue sticky notes. And what I'd like you to think about is, and just one thought on each sticky, please, in terms of what you think EC's strengths are. And I'm not expecting you to answer all of these questions, but these are prompting questions. What do you think, what makes Edwardsburg Cardinal Services better than others? What are some of the accomplishments you've had over 3, could be longer than that, years or so? What do you think EC does well? What are some of your competencies, council and staff that are in EC that you can build on? What's the knowledge, skills that you have to support change? What do other people say about EC that does well? So, yeah.
Not working?
Oh,
Dead already.
dead on arrival, that's not good.
Awarded already.
You're worried out already?
Thank you.
Are the other ones?
Is everybody okay?
Sounds good.
Everybody else all right? I'm gonna throw that one in the garbage. So we don't do markers well, I guess.
That's one
So if
defect.
you wanna just put some thoughts on, one thought per sticky, and then I'll come around and gather them all, and we'll talk about them. One thought, yeah, one strength. And like I said, these are some of the prompting questions, and I don't expect you to answer them, but hopefully help you think.
One comment per sticky, and
Yeah.
you only want one sticky, right?
No, you get to do lots of
We can-
stickies.
we can just
Yeah,
keep on going?
just keep going, yeah. I just want only one thought per sticky, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah. But please, I'm sure you have more than one strength, and and then we'll talk about them and put them into groups. I have one right here. strengths ones are easy, wait till the next one. Give you a couple more minutes and then
Will we get to do this tomorrow, Ted?
you guys get to do this tomorrow. You're getting a preview.
Oh, so you're gonna use us as guinea pigs?
What's gonna be interesting is we'll have the council one, and then we'll have the staff, the management
Now,
one.
is there gonna be any tipping off? Yeah.
You guys are sworn to secrecy, right? But it's gonna be on YouTube, so.
It scares me that you've watched those videos.
I know,
I thought I was the only one.
well,
You're,
it's only-
you're the other 3 views.
I put my little lights on.
You mean they've gone back to when we started on council? Hopefully. You have to eliminate the first 10.
Okay. It gives you a good flavor, you know, before you're gonna meet some people. It's good. It's a strength. Okay, let's start collecting here. We can have a conversation.
You want them all separate or?
Yeah, that's fine, I'm gonna mix them all up, so, you can be all innocent. I'm sure we'll see some
I'll
themes.
sign mine if I need to.
Thanks.
Have to make up my writing.
Well, you know, that is a
When
challenge
she has to
sometimes.
ask, when she has to
When I
ask
have
for
to
the
ask for the exact
English translation.
Well, yes. Now that I use the computer, my handwriting is, I actually had to really think about that one.
With the little pen I've started, and it doesn't, it'll do my typing for me
Yes.
if I just
Oh,
write, but
yes.
half the time it gets the words wrong, so.
Yeah. Some of them might not be that very nice.
My writing's pretty crappy.
Can I gather up your thoughts here?
So,
Alrighty. I'm not gonna read them yet. Thank you, sir. Holy,
Mayor's got lots of
he's
strength,
got lots
you know, he
of,
hasn't
lots
that
of
many
strengths to
weaknesses.
talk about. Did I get everybody?
Well, see, he's had the most experience.
Okay, so, strong senior township staff. Tell me about that. I'm assuming it's not just muscles.
lots of experience.
Lots of experience? Okay,
And,
Knowledge.
Wealth of expertise and knowledge.
okay, yeah.
Lots of township.
call it a spade a spade.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. Low tax rate, relatively low housing costs. So do we know that? How do we know that we have a low tax rate? Do we hear that, or have we done analysis to say that?
It's been compared.
It has been compared? Okay,
We know what most of the other townships around us are,
okay.
the tax rates are.
And do we hear this from citizens?
Not as much as we should.
No. Because it wouldn't matter how low they were.
Yeah.
We hear it from people that move in
Move
with the
in.
corporations, like when, in Vista and Radiant, people move in from Toronto or Ottawa or Calgary or something, come here and they say, well,
Okay.
this is something, we got a $2,000 tax bill instead of a $8,000 one, so.
And do we promote that?
Not as much as we should.
Okay.
Strengths.
Okay. Good budget process and, good follow-up quarterly. So tell me about that.
Well, we have a pretty robust process. It takes a fair amount of time. We don't rush it. And there's lots of opportunity for second thought and lots of opportunity for good cross-communication between the elected officials and the staff proposal.
Okay.
It's a good bouncing. It's a tough process.
Yeah, well, they always are, aren't they? Is the community involved in the budget process?
Don't,
No?
But there's a lot of.
shouldn't say that. Yeah, they are. They
Yeah.
get one shot every 4 years.
And of course, you're representing the community, so of course.
Exactly,
Yes.
that's my
Well,
point.
we do have 2 community appointees on the committee too, so.
That,
Okay.
exactly, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Our port helps us offset taxes. So that's kind of why it's low as well. Can you tell me about this a little
Well,
bit more?
the, because the township owns the Port of Johnstown.
Right.
It gives us X amount of dollars every year to go to the township, which we use in our budget process to offset the tax base.
Okay, okay, that's great.
Represents about 800,000, represents about
Approximately,
16 tax, or percentage points.
Yeah.
That is the St. Lawrence River waterfront, of course. How does this give us strength?
Well, they're not making any more waterfront,
They are not, that's for sure.
so we have it,
Yeah,
and we should be taking advantage of it. And promoting it.
yeah.
And as a township, I believe that we own a fairly sizable chunk of that waterfront. I'm not sure that other municipalities have that same strength.
And is it actually, to what degree is that developed from a township?
5%.
Very little, yes.
Quality life. What do we mean by quality life? Of course, you're rural, so,
Oh, it's a good place to come and live,
yeah,
raise a family.
yeah.
Low
Councillor Hunter said our taxes are low, our housing's reasonable,
We have 2 arenas.
our crimes
2 pools.
low, 2 pools.
Okay. And I didn't get stuck in traffic coming here.
Well,
I'll wait till
Not the
you,
back ways that I took,
we don't
anyway.
talk about that.
wait till you go home.
Okay.
They're coming to the Johnstown before one shut down.
Just make sure there's no accident on 401.
Yes.
Get
Well, you
rid, you're
see,
coming from Perth, we don't get
we-
much traffic jam.
no. I didn't go on the 401, I went to back roads. But I'm a back roads girl, so. Port of Johnstown. Okay. And of course, you're very close to the US border because of that, right? So, location. This is kind of the 416, the 401 US, so tell me how the township has utilized that location.
Well, we have used it in presentations and,
Yeah,
to businesses and whatnot, and we've been very fortunate to have very little of our industrial park land left. It's all been pretty much sold and developed. And of course, the 400 series highways, which we have 2, and a bridge to the United States. We have one within sight of our industrial park,
right,
and so that is that's also an attraction.
for sure. Actually, you're probably pretty unique, actually. Growing industrial base, so that's part and parcel of that, but, so, of course, you got your park, when you, look at that industrial base, that's certainly a strength, how does that play into your planning long-term? Because obviously, industrial, parks also have their requirements around infrastructure, right? So it's growing, certainly a strength, but maybe talk to me a little bit about how that is growing. What are the types of industry that is attracted here?
Okay, so the transportation industry, in terms of the Giant Tiger Distribution Center, Greenergy, is a growing transportation hub. It will be a significant transportation hub. Greenfield Ethanol is a very robust industrial manufacturer of ethanol from corn.
Yeah,
Ingredient in Cardinal, one of the major manufacturers of corn sweeteners in North America. I mean, one of their major plants is here. Again, corn sweeteners from corn. I mean, those kinds of industrial tax bases tend to really shore up the residential tax base. And I think we're developing a good ratio between the residential tax base and the industrial tax base. Still not as high as I'd like to see it, but I think it's coming, where a lot of others are slipping.
Yes, for sure. What is the makeup between the, I haven't done my tax analysis yet. What is the makeup between residential, commercial, industrial?
We're at, right around 78% residential, 22 commercial and industrial, which is pretty high.
That's pretty high for Eastern Ontario, for sure. Most Eastern Ontario municipalities are in the 90% residential, so.
Yep.
Yeah. Strong agricultural sector that supports our port, so can you tell me about that?
Well, we've got one of the fastest growing agricultural sectors for growth in Eastern Ontario right around here. We've got some of the largest dairy farms.
Oh, yeah.
Edwardsburg, Cardinal, where the United Counties of Legion and Grenville, we have the two largest dairy herds in Legion and Grenville in our thing.
Yeah,
We have a very active agricultural support system that's supporting and feeds through to support our port. If we didn't have them, our port wouldn't be as robust as it is. Strong soybean growth and corn growth.
so you've got a pretty good balance then between agriculture and industrial. So
We've got $5 million barns, over $1 million, and actually six well over the million.
Plus, we have one agriculture sector that is strong in dairy and agriculture, plus they provide green energy through a digester system that they absorb a lot of our waste from our two agricultural plants in port, that rather than have to be shipped out, it's close proximity, they can be trucked there and put in the digester to make use through, so it supports
Waste to
everybody,
energy.
so.
that's impressive, for sure. Strong financial reserves. So how do we know that?
Dollars and cents.
Dollars and cents. We see it every time we open our budget.
Yeah.
We see it every time our auditors tell us how strong
Yeah.
the reserves are compared to everybody
Correct.
else's, so.
So do you feel that they are where they need to be?
Never out of
Never.
Always want more in there.
What is the sort of the sentiment from the public around, like I said, we put it, this is back in 2004 now, my history, putting it together a reserve policy back in the day, and it was met with mixed reviews, so what's the
Public generally
citizens-
doesn't really understand what reserves and reserve accounts are all about. And we talk about it, but we don't talk enough about it. But I think the public has a broad general sense of confidence in the financial strength, comfort level.
I think they have, public, I think really over the last 15 years are absorbing the knowledge of strong reserves in their township better because so much PR that we're getting from our province and country being so far in depth,
Yeah.
they look and when they see our auditor's report comes out and shows that, we got 28% reserve funds sitting there, that they realize that, if something drastically happens, we don't have to immediately go and borrow money. We have money that can cover a truck being broke down or building disaster or something. We have money there that we can draw. We don't want to draw it, but it's there if we have to have it, so.
That's good. Because like I said, we must be doing a fairly good job in terms of communication, because a lot of municipalities struggle with that, for sure. Great council and committee structure.
Make sure you read the whole note.
Is that you again, man?
We didn't put down any place there. We
Not
put
you.
down low
Not you,
council.
Debbie.
I didn't mean as we were a great
Great
council, I meant the
The
structure
structure,
part
I
of it.
know, I had to use my emphasis here.
Thank you.
So.
You made my ears turn red. That's hard to do.
So tell me about that.
I think, like from my perspective, being involved the last 4 years outside as part of the committee structure, watching how serious the council takes, input from the community and the citizens, right, to allowing them voting positions on the committee structure, and then bring those ideas back to the way that council passes tonight's council meeting, and we'll take everything that comes from the committees and we'll move it forward as the council. And I think the structure of it really engages our citizens well if they want to take that opportunity. It operates in a very open and transparent way.
I think also to add to it there too, I think this council did take a forestep a number of years ago, because this council used to be 7, and townships are always getting criticized for the number of people, and we did reduce our council to a 5-member council, so I think that just shows that we're trying to stay as modernized as we can, and get the best results for people for what they're paying for, so.
Was that sort of popular from the township citizens? Was there any?
There was quite a bit of feedback
Yeah.
in my ward.
Yeah.
Negative feedback.
Yeah.
Regarding that, because the feeling that a lot of people have is the more heads you have at the table, the more information you're going to be able to act on or absorb.
Yeah.
So it did, it was an issue in my ward.
Yeah.
It was an issue back in the back ward where I represented. Most people thought we had too many on council. Most people wanted more people elected at large, and then before we just had the mayor was the only one elected at large, and when we changed it, now the deputy mayor is elected at large, so now they have a say in, everybody has a say in at least 2 people that they're gonna vote for or not vote for, so I think, in my opinion on it, it was pretty well received, so.
And so from the committee structure, do you find that it is also efficient, or is in terms of being
Yeah,
able to
because we
move
operate
it?
as committee of the whole.
Yeah.
Only 5 we operate
Yeah.
as committee of the whole, so that, everybody's aware of all the detail of all of the discussion that goes into all of the committee recommendations.
So you're eliminating.
It
the
works pretty
duplication.
efficient.
Yeah, okay, good. Excellent municipal water and sewer in Cardinal. So tell me about that. Obviously, the entire township that doesn't have water and sewer. But tell me about this then, water and sewer in Cardinal. So that's in terms of,
You can put it under.
yeah, it could be anything.
Well, the water and sewer system in Garden was a user-pay system,
Yeah.
of course, so it's paid for by the people that use the services. And it was our infrastructure was installed many, many years ago, so it's an ongoing battle to keep the pipes replaced and in good operating condition. And we have an excellent staff at our both water plant and water treatment plant that keeps things flowing.
Thank God they're flowing, yes.
Yeah, right. And in reasonable repair, so we do.
How old is the plant?
The plant would be 20, I'm going to say, the new plant, I guess, or the current plant is, and Director of Operations, you're gonna have to help me out, I'm gonna say about 20 years.
So
Oh, no,
the water treatment plant is 1989, and the wastewater treatment plant is 96.
96, oh. Good, thank you.
Is there any sort of push from other residents for municipal water and sewer?
There's not a push, but, those systems are a little bit too small in terms of, I mean, the basic operating parameters have to be supported by a relatively small number of users, but it works.
But we do have room for expansion, of course, there
There is some room.
And I would say we're not yet at full cost recovery. We say we are, but I'm not really comfortable with it.
That might be on our weakness side?
Yeah, I would say so.
Spencerville here, in the Spencerville area, we just have sewers here.
Right.
Goes to the lagoon.
Right.
It's well maintained and
Yeah.
stuff, but we are going to be in a problem here because Spencerville's locked in. There's going to be a limited number of users. We've got very limited space left that we can expand to spread the cost costs go up, it's gonna be a challenge for the municipality to maintain the cost structure for Spencerville here, because we're gonna, somewhere along the line, there's gonna be a breaking point here that we gotta do something that we can accommodate more people to be able to get on the sewers to help keep the price down.
Right.
Because when we were built, when I was on council 30-some years ago, when we put the sewers in, the area to the west of here was open land and was expected that it was gonna be expanded, areas to expand it, but then the fair board took over that thing and kind of locked up our expansion land where we figured there'd be houses built. Now it's been taken over, so now we gotta look to a different area for expansion. And we're kind of locked in with landowners that, on both sides of us, that really don't need to sell the land and probably don't want to sell the land, so it's going to make a stress on the people.
We should have the yellow thing,
But also
Don't
that-
forget that one when
Different
we
color.
start doing our
Different color.
weaknesses, okay?
It is a
Sometimes
strength-
it's happened.
But it is a strength that we have.
Yes, of course, yeah.
But that being said, our water treatment and our wastewater treatment is state of the art.
Yeah.
It's right up to the.
Yeah.
It's well.
They're well operated.
Staff at all levels are service oriented, so this is a little different than your senior staff. They're service, and you have a service culture. So, tell me about that.
Well, I think
How do you know that?
Well, because I think our staff is, I mean, we get enough feedback from the public. Not everybody's happy all the time, but there's not that many disgruntled. And I think by and large, the whole structure is realizes that it's a service delivery function that we perform.
I think we have
Customer satisfaction.
we have some very good employees, both administration and union staff that are, I don't say accommodating, but very friendly with our ratepayers, that if they stop them, they don't just ignore them, they'll stop, they'll take the time to stop and listen to their complaint, or listen to their thank you or whatever, but that they will, and I think that's something, some townships I've been in and involved in, they really don't, they just go talk to administration, we're just out on the road, so.
And many of our employees have been with us for quite a period of time. So we have that
Seasoned.
strength
Very
Yes.
little turnover.
to,
Little turnover.
Yeah.
That is actually very rare these days. The municipal sector is
We have good loyalty,
suffering from,
strong loyalty among our employees, so.
and that all comes from strong leadership too. You know, so strong competent staff, well-trained, so that's certainly, there's this theme going on there. Good open communication with staff and elected officials. No one's gonna talk. So,
We seem to be able to disagree and get those points
Okay.
made both ways.
yeah. Agree to disagree sometimes?
Oh, no, we generally win.
Yeah, okay. It's gonna be interesting to see what we hear tomorrow, right?
Yeah, it'd be nice to
You'll hear
sit in,
different
it'd be nice to sit in a few minutes in
See that on YouTube.
there. Yeah.
Volunteers, large group of volunteers in the township. So, that is, and that comes from being, in the rural, community oriented, right? So, we gotta, what kind of volunteers do we have?
We have a lot of volunteers, we have functions that are run in this township that township couldn't handle it on our own, a small township, but we have volunteers on both committees and volunteers that set up their own committees to get stuff done.
Okay.
We have a very strong business group in Spencerville here that are all volunteers, we have a very strong fair board volunteers.
we have
Very strong volunteers in Cardinal and the Legion in Cardinal there that works hard, and
And
a lot
the
of
festival
volunteers that
committee
come out of
Yeah.
as well.
the union in the starch plant in Cardinal that head up their own fundraising committees for raising, keeping play days and stuff going. So,
That's,
Johnstown has a very strong volunteer group out there that's run for years to help develop recreation and programs there.
you have any kind of volunteer recommend, sort of recognition approach? So, industrial park, obviously, professional staff, there's there's a big theme there, and that's technology. It's finally got to technology, eh? Technology, so, up to date, programs and software,
Working on
It's
Working
getting
on it.
there,
it's getting there.
and you're gonna make it better.
So, how do we know this?
I was just gonna say, I don't know that.
I don't think so.
Okay,
our staff tells us.
okay,
But we get comparators with others.
yeah,
And, you know, I mean, I think the big point about that is that we're a pretty open-minded group here. When we recognize that we're falling behind, and we just bought eScribe. I mean, we're probably a year late buying eScribe, but at the same time, we know that we knew that it was a lack and it had to be met. We stepped up to our risk management responsibilities here as well in terms of purchasing insurance for cyber attack. I think by and large, we're pretty aware of the fact that our technology has to be kept up all the way along.
okay. Well, who's responsible for IT? Well, like with everything else, right? So that might be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and I guess to be clear, we do have a contracted
Do you?
IT security firm
Okay.
that we use.
Okay. Financially solvent, we talked about that. Strong agriculture, we talked about that. Good governance structure, I see some good office processes for public service delivery. Is that the same as what we were talking about in terms of, there's a difference between staff interaction and process? So how do we know we have good processes?
Don't get too many complaints.
We don't get complaints, okay. That's always good. Council's very conscious of the value per dollar.
I think we're very, what's it called?
Penny pinching.
Well, no.
That's a different focus.
A lot of Scotch ancestry.
There's a good way to spend a dollar and a poor way to spend a dollar.
Yes, yes.
And I think we're pretty good judges.
Okay. Workforce stability, we talked about that, and strong leadership. So we're seeing some definitely themes, certainly on the staffing side, your committee structure. Obviously, you're in a pretty good place financially, and certainly your location provides all kinds of.
Just before you.
Oh, you have
Can I
another there?
just add those two quick,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
important to this
Yep.
discussion as well.
Recreation?
Yeah. Yeah, don't judge.
Recreation, so you got 2 arenas, 2 pools. Well, of course, we all know arenas are,
Possibly.
yes, we do. I did some work for Prescott, so.
And pools too.
And 2 pools, okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're very well recreational.
Okay, yeah, that definitely, from a quality of life perspective.
We got 2.5 pools.
2.5 pools?
Got a kiddie pool.
Oh, okay. And 2 elementary schools. Do you have any high schools in?
No,
Ah, okay.
just on the border.
So they go to,
Prescott.
South Greenville,
Prescott, Campbell,
St. Mark's.
Rockville.
okay. Anything else? Did we miss anything else? It'd be interesting to see if those are the same strengths that staff and management said. Thank you. That was the easy part. So, when we look at weaknesses, so this is the stuff that we have to recognize that, you know, where we could improve, so, Vanna, we need yellow.
There we go.
So in weaknesses, again, we're looking internally as well here. What are some of the areas where you think Edwardsburg Cardinal could improve, provide better services? Areas maybe where you're not as efficient as you could be? What you think maybe EC doesn't do well? Or if there's some knowledge, skills, competencies that might be missing. Anything you think that you should stop or avoid doing? Things that you wanted to get done, whether it be this term of council, before, that haven't been achieved. So, again, they're not trying to get you to answer the questions, they're just prompting things to discuss. Just give you a few more seconds and make sure we get to our opportunities.
I'll start with that.
I can read your.
Spelling sometimes isn't.
That's why we have computers these days.
It does
Can I
it
take
for us.
yours?
There you
Doing
go.
on this?
So was it harder to find the weaknesses than the strengths?
Always.
It always is. Don't want to admit we have them. Okay. Increase recreation activities. So can you tell me how that's a weakness? We are being challenged to increase, is that what we mean?
I mean, yes, if we had more, if we had a little bit better recreation in some of our communities, drawing younger families, possibly younger families.
Okay, so we've got some areas perhaps that doesn't have the
It's a programming issue.
programming, yeah, okay. Not enough kids keep schools open. Tell me about that, are kids moving away
Just
from the
declining.
township?
Well, we have to attract young families.
Well, I think it's the option.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah,
I think the board closed our school a little bit too soon.
oh,
The school in Cardinal, I think the school in Cardinal would have been a viable school in 2 years, 3 years from now. Because we're getting young families moving in,
Yeah.
but their enrollment was so low,
oh,
they didn't really want to spend the money on the building.
I think I recall this.
They wimped out on us,
Okay, when was that?
2 years ago.
2 years ago? Yeah, that's sounding familiar. Okay, so, and we have, when I talked about mega trends, unfortunately, the trend is to move to cities. And so,
Yeah, we sure see that in spades.
yeah. Yeah. Reduced amount of serviced site-ready industrial land, because you said it's almost pretty well sold out, right?
Yep.
So, yes, that could potentially be challenging. Not a unified township, ooh. Is this because it used to be Edwardsburg and Cardinal, and now it's Edwardsburg Cardinal?
You got it.
Okay,
We
Still
we
exists?
We still have a word system
Yeah.
for our elected officials, and it's great that they don't really exercise that once they get to the table. They represent, I think, fairly the entire township, but they aren't elected at large. They're elected by Spencerville or Johnstown or Cardinal. And that just by nature, keeps, it creates a division, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great way of saying it. The more we elect at large, the greater chance there is to create that unity.
this is not a.
Now that viewpoint that you've just heard
Yes.
is a single viewpoint shared by one person,
Okay.
not shared,
What
not
about
shared
the
by all.
community?
Not
Does the
shared by all.
community feel that way?
There's a north-south divide, but it's
Yeah.
Okay.
quite a common, it's quite a
It's an amalgamation,
understandable thing.
it's an amalgamation problem.
It's like a
That
hangover.
That when, you amalgamate
Yeah.
two forces,
Yeah.
well, there's gonna be disruption.
Yeah. Absolutely, and some of them have, and how long ago did this happen?
2000.
2000, when all the other amalgamations
Yeah.
Yeah.
occurred.
And in fairness, we all talked about it during our election cycle. It was mentioned lots of times about the willingness to eliminate wards, and it would become a discussion over the next 4 years.
Okay. Some approved projects are executed too slowly. Can we have an example, and what do you mean by too slowly?
Well, I'll use the most recent example, took too damn long to get the docks in the water.
Okay,
The docs never got it.
they didn't get in the water? Okay, and any sense of what the root cause is of that?
Well, it was a high water level for one.
Ah, okay.
It was an
Climate.
atmospheric problem.
Okay. And then,
But there's other projects,
Yeah.
we
Redoing the riverfront,
Yeah.
very slow doing that.
we got a sign project on, and then, it's a function of just process. You can't really pin a blame down any place, it's just too slow for those of us that are type As.
yeah. Government.
Yeah.
I used to work for Treasury Board, you wanna talk about slow?
Oh, we know.
Yeah. Never enough money for all the priorities, so you've got, resource, even though on the strength side, you've got good financial sustainability, there's still not enough money for everything you wanna do, right?
Well, I don't believe that, but I know some of these people at the table does.
We like strong reserves.
Yeah, that's right. I like to spend a little bit of those reserves.
Okay, so it is a priority issue, basically.
What is?
in terms of being able to determine where you're going to spend the money?
Like that's always.
Do you have a, in your budget process, do you have a objective sort of rating criteria for determining projects?
I think our staff generally, any capital projects, they generally bring forward with immediate, could add to it, or we don't have a choice, government says you gotta do it.
Well, it's always those, yeah. Oh, I've never heard this in a municipality before. Some bylaws are too weak for serious enforcement.
That's me.
Okay,
I just
So-
like, well, I mean, I got a real kick on for a yards bylaw,
okay,
and it's just, it's a bit too weak, in my
okay.
opinion. Mind you, the staff does a great job trying to, how shall I say, entice enforcement as
Yes.
opposed to hard enforcement. But sometimes you know, some people ride us the full, they ride us the full gamut.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, you think we got a bylaw property? What about our cat problem?
Well, you got stray cat Strut here?
We got one cat
Love it.
problem. Let's
Oh,
be good.
oh, okay.
Let's keep moving.
It's a good one.
Some issues are slow to resolve. Is that the same issue as around the projects? Or is it?
Well, one is projects, the other is issues.
Yeah, so
Because
what
we
do
get lots
we
of
have an
issues
example?
that are just, I call them from the past,
Okay,
you know, and, I mean, the way things were done in the old days creates problems for us in the new days. And it takes a while to sort them out and come to a resolution.
and some of the people that have been here have seen them for a long time, probably
Yeah.
too, because you said you got some people that have been around for
Yeah,
for that
exactly.
period of time. Rely on Prescott to provide water to the industrial park. So, why is that a weakness?
We had a provincial government 40 years ago, wouldn't let us build a room water.
Uh-huh. So
What I
there's
was down to.
We're relying upon another municipality to
Municipality.
provide us
Right.
services, yeah.
So you don't have the same decision-making power, is that it?
Well, and we're at the mercy of the contract
Right.
negotiations when that happens.
Of course, yeah. Not ready to work collaboratively with our neighbors. Tell me about that. So Prescott obviously is one of
This,
your neighbors.
this process is
Yeah.
and was
Mhm.
brought down from the Minister of
Yes.
Municipal Affairs and Housing. They
Mhm.
provided all of the townships with a great amount
Yeah.
of working capital to fund things like consultants.
Yeah.
So that we could find some willingness to work together.
Yeah.
Without that funding, I think we would be, not choosing to
Right.
to go down that road. And I think the province has backtracked a little bit on their reducing the funds that they're going to give us. They've stepped away from that a little bit, and as they've stepped away from it a little bit, the feeling that I have is that so has the elected representatives from that willingness that was originally there has backed away as the province has backed away.
But again, it's, the way you presented it, and I'm looking at it here, did you read it right? Not
It
ready
says
to
not
work?
ready to work collaboratively with our neighbors.
Well, I mean, and I take issue with that, because I think we're ready.
Okay.
It takes two to tango.
So it's hard though, right? It's very difficult to get neighboring municipalities to work together.
Yes, and one thing I might add, but I ran out of space, is that,
Okay,
and we've talked about it before, but we work, and I guess we are sort of going to do this,
Yes.
but the willingness to work collaboratively is maybe a better way
Yeah.
to say it. But in the past and continually, because of the way grants are done and the way funding's done, we work competitively against each other.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I was
Yeah.
getting at when I wrote that, but I mean, it's pretty tough to.
yeah,
Yeah.
in that period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We provide recreation rinks to Augusta and other out of township without something.
Now you're getting not crowded up there too.
Yeah.
Basically, we're providing our RIC services to other townships, not getting reimbursed.
Oh,
for-
so
is
there's
that right
no,
on mine?
there's no, out of township fee?
No,
No.
Oh, okay.
so, but
Okay, that's
It's getting to be
interesting.
a sore spot after 40 years of running
Yes,
these and not
I-
getting
I-
paid for them, but,
I can see that.
But it's a two-way street
Yeah.
with Prescott.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a two-way street. Prescott doesn't get paid by us when they had their rate.
yeah, they
So,
use our
I
rate
mean, you
too.
just can't say we're not getting paid. I mean, Prescott didn't get paid either when
No.
they had their rate, so.
But Gustus had a free ride for 40
Wow,
years.
that's
so-
tough.
Areas of the township do not work together. I think that was kind of, we were talking about the unified. Do not make good use of our natural resources,
Yeah,
as we should, okay? What do we mean by that?
well, we've got a lot of good, we've got riverfront property that we're not using, we've got parks that aren't being fully utilized.
Yep.
Lots of areas in the township that could be utilized, or natural resources that could be made a lot better use of than what we're making of them, so.
10,000 acres of provincial land bank that's sitting idle.
Mm. So that's, I think we need that for our opportunities,
Let's
right?
do anything with it, so.
Increase amenities, grocery store, banks, et cetera. So I think, is this again, we don't have these things?
That's right.
We do
Okay.
not have them.
Okay. Yes, so people leave the township to go shopping.
Oh, yeah.
And working and everything
And
else.
working, and, okay. United Communities, we talked about that. Time management, I was interested in this one. I'm assuming that we, the weakness is we don't do time management, or is this about your project?
No,
I'm not sure.
I think the time management is just an overall
Okay,
umbrella that people have to be aware
Uh-huh.
that they have to manage their time efficiently,
yeah,
and that's what I expect myself from all department heads,
yeah.
that they manage their time efficiently.
And do we think we don't do that, or is it?
There's always room for improvement.
Yeah. One of the things in the municipal sector is, the amount of work is growing, typically the number of resources are not. So, it's a challenge for sure. Communication, some work to, the areas need to improve. So is that sort of in the same realm, or is there departments? Are we talking here between departments? Are we talking in between counselors? Are we talking between committees? What do we mean there?
What does it say?
It says communication, some work needs to improve, I think it says. I'm not sure.
There's always room for communications.
Mhm.
And communication is the thing that drives most industries.
Yep.
Without proper communication and the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing
Right.
at all times, then communication has to improve.
So is this more of an internal thing?
Yeah.
Here? Okay. Don't market ourselves. So, you do have some strategies, but you don't market ourselves?
I don't think we market our area, I'm not saying that we don't market our industrial park, or
Right.
something, but I don't think we really, and I don't think it's all townships, I think it's a lot of our own businesses within our township don't market themselves out. Like we have
Right.
house builders and stuff, and we have lots available to build on and stuff, and I don't think we actually market ourselves outside now with all so much business that can be done from home-based businesses.
Yeah.
And firms like yourself, that really doesn't matter where
Yeah.
you live, why pay $10,000 a month rent in Ottawa for a place when there's places in the township that you could, be owning a place for $5,000 a month? And I think our builders and our realtors people maybe don't market us, and maybe we should be helping them along to market ourselves to the areas that there's so much home-based business that can be done now. I think we'd have a lot more. I don't think Ottawa realizes until somebody moves out here how close we are to Ottawa. We get all kinds of people that come into my business there that move out here and say, oh, geez, took me an hour to drive from San Laurent over to Terry Fox. Geez, I was there from Spencerville in 40 minutes, so
Yeah.
why didn't I move out
Exactly.
here 20 years ago? So,
Yeah, for sure.
No, we may not
That's
market
good.
it, but there's a lot of it happening. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know how you would market something like that, but there's a lot of it happening. There's a tremendous number of people coming out of the cities and working out of
Yeah.
home-based businesses. And an awful lot of people coming out of the cities commuting 1 or 2 days a week.
yeah, no, that's good. Increase housing for seniors. So this is obviously an epidemic across all of Canada. And we're talking about affordable housing issues here? Or it just senior housing, what do we?
Just senior in general.
Just
Yeah.
senior housing,
Okay.
yeah.
And lack of, there's a couple here about residential growth, so you certainly have having the industrial growth, usually residential growth goes with industrial growth, so maybe it's,
But we're pretty consistent at 20, maybe this year will be a little bit different, but we're pretty consistent at around 20 new builds a year.
okay. Subdivisions, or are they
Single.
mostly single?
Not subdivision.
Right.
Well, I mean, the subdivisions are getting built out. Well, I shouldn't say that. One
Yeah.
subdivision is rapidly being built out, the other two aren't yet started.
Okay, and that's usually, you know, for larger growth, that's usually, unfortunately, it has its own challenges, subdivisions have their own challenges.
Well, I think also with residential growth too, our industrial growth is growing, but there ain't.
There's
you
no place to
probably
live.
see it, there's always a lag time before residential, like people aren't gonna move and build there until they see if they're happy with that business and that business is gonna survive before they're gonna start building. Or developers are gonna come in and say, okay, we're gonna build 50 houses because this is really taking off, because the people are gonna wanna live here, so.
Absolutely, there is obviously a lot, so that's good, so there's some, again, there's some themes there can be opposite to our strengths. And let's go, man. Now, the fun part, where are our opportunities? So, and I promised to get you out to your break, so. So,
Thank
when
you.
thinking of opportunities, the green means go, of course, some of these, what do we see some opportunities? Some of them are gonna come from what we just talked about, in terms of strengths or weaknesses. The opposite sometimes shows that there's opportunities. In thinking of that, what could be done today that isn't being done, any services that the township does not provide, kind of talk about it on the weakness side, who can help or support the township. feeling I already know what you're gonna say. Okay. All right. Oh, that's got a double one, okay.
You got it invented.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Oh. These ones are easy, huh? Okay. Green means go, opportunities. Find solutions for better broadband coverage. So, this is a Eastern Ontario problem.
EORN.
Yep. So, certainly there's some movement on that, but, poor broadband coverage in the township?
A lot of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Different opportunities.
It's gonna be hard to get home-based businesses,
A lot of dead areas.
right? Yeah. We don't even sell service in these places still, so, either.
It's hard to imagine.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. Property standards, how is this an opportunity?
Well, once you have a property standards bylaw or issue,
Yeah.
you can put standards in place
Yeah.
that will help improve the community, such as, there are some townships that you can't park a travel trailer
Yes.
in the area. Some areas do allow it, and some are fine, and there's others that it's a bad situation.
So currently you don't have a property standards bylaw?
Not a strong property standards bylaw. We do have bylaws for yards and things like that, but not a down, we'll say down and dirty property standards.
And this is advancement of the Port of Johnstown, so, how do we mean that? I mean, obviously that it's there, but what do we mean by that?
More industry, different types of industries coming in,
Yeah.
different cargoes coming in,
Okay,
improve shipping out of it, more transportation coming out of the port.
okay. Continue port growth, there we go. You just said that. Tourism, historical areas. Gulf Canal, Spencerville Mill, so what do we mean here? Do we have a tourism strategy?
But you've also got to remember that this area is highly historical.
Absolutely.
You know, right along the St. Lawrence River from, we'll say, Kingston to Cornwall is highly, we have United Empire of Loyalists that actually came here, and descendants are here. We have the battles that were fought through here, huge amount of history, and I don't think we take advantage of that.
Does the federal government help in that regard at all?
Very little.
Very
Well,
little,
for
well, they
him,
have Upper Canada Village.
Yeah.
You know.
Land bank released from province. Can you tell me what that means? Land bank?
Well, there's 10,000 acres in the provincial land bank. We'd like to get
Okay.
little pieces of it released for agriculture and other purposes.
Oh, okay.
We've been losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in investment every year ever since it took place. We had a study done some 30 years ago, and council estimated the township was gonna be losing $1 million a quarter.
Oh.
So, because nothing can be developed, and you get next to zero taxes out of it, so.
Beaver ponds. Beaver ponds.
Beaver
That's about
ponds.
the only development that's going on there now.
The Animal
Yeah.
rights one won't let us trap, animal rights one won't let us trap the beavers, so can't make money on them.
No? Okay, that's redoing. Residential developments, well-priced, affordable land. So you're outside of Ottawa, you should be able to get developers to come out, right? Increased advertising for local events. So that's kind of the tourism side of things as well, right? draw people to the area, so I'm seeing a theme here. Develop the village core, what do we mean by that? Which
Well,
village?
Well, in the village of Cardinal,
Yep.
we do not have a grocery store.
Uh-huh,
That would be nice
Yeah.
to have. If we lose our pharmacy, it's going to be quite a chore.
Mm.
There's a lot of senior people in the village, as there are other villages
Yeah.
as well, Spencerville as well,
Yes.
that just have a problem getting around and getting to places to shop and do things, because the first area is Prescott.
Yeah.
And then if you wanna go bigger, you have to go to Brockville, so.
So that's an opportunity for sure. Collaboration, combined services with neighboring municipalities, example, fire, library, recreation. So, we had a weakness that we don't feel like we're collaborating enough, but this is definitely an opportunity. Is the community ready for that?
In some areas.
Some areas?
I think, you know, we, when we're pointing out our strengths and weaknesses, I mean, a lot of people drive to work very short distances outside of our township, right? Like, they drive to work in Prescott, they drive to work in Brockville, they drive to work in Morrisburg. Their kids go to school in Kempville, their kids go to school in Prescott. I mean, the regional boundaries are not the same anymore, so grocery shopping in Prescott, while it would be wonderful, isn't, for a lot of people, an inconvenience either, because they're used to driving that distance anyway.
Collaborate at the regional level, so it's kind of the same thing. Support and retain current businesses. So we talk about building them, but now we are talking about putting supports in place for the current businesses. Obviously, I have seen places where the new businesses have moved out the old businesses, so there's always a balance. Amenities for seniors, I think we talked about that. Transportation activities, so what are our transportation networks here?
None.
Car,
Zero.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sufficient unused residential lots, so we've got, that's certainly some additional industrial, do you have actually industrial space?
We can find it.
Okay. Industry has great expansion opportunities, Port of Johnston, talk about that again. Waterfront development, so this is a little different, park enhancements. So this is actually using the natural resources. Is there a waterfront development project in place?
Well, we'll see after tonight.
Oh. I'll cycle back on that.
You can check with staff in the morning.
Monday.
I will. Industrial again, advanced agricultural development, so again, that's a balancing act between your industrial. Marketing the township, add sports programs. So, can we do that? Do we have the capacity to add
Oh,
additional
sure.
sports programs?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Got lots of facilities.
okay. And efficiency through technology.
Save that one till the last.
There's always stuff we don't know. Okay, we've got 5 minutes to do threats, not that we have any threats in municipal government whatsoever. So, we have obviously the ones that come up to mind. What are some of the negative things that are occurring? So funding issues, so that that are gonna impact on your goals and objectives, any obstacles, problems, any other stakeholders that might impact you. So things that are going to threaten the township. break before your next meeting, so. I'm sure you'll need it. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. They're really sticky, aren't they? They really are threatening. Thank you.
This,
Okay, being prepared for services, are we ready? What do we mean by that?
sorry, seniors,
Oh,
are we prepared like for?
Seniors, oh, I'm
Seniors,
sorry, I'm sorry. Oh, of course, our demographics are changing. Do we have the right kind of services for the aging generation? Provincial, federal funding being reduced. Well, we don't know what's gonna happen, and we don't know what's gonna happen, right? We just know something's gonna happen. Disasters, do we mean natural here?
Both.
Climate change?
Both,
Both, natural
yes.
and
we'll say man-made.
man-made disasters, absolutely. So, requirement too in terms of asset management planning.
Well, for instance, with the high water level this year in our township, we've suffered some considerable shoreline loss and damage. Of course, that's a natural disaster, but you can have others as well,
Absolutely.
a plane crash or, and every time the 401 is closed,
Yeah,
we've got a problem.
that's,
That
and
becomes
now
a
they made a show about it,
That becomes,
Yeah,
which I can't imagine anybody wanting to watch, because I'm on the 401 all the time, I don't wanna watch it. Provincial regulatory burden, new legislation. Well, has anybody ever, I think I did it when I was at the county, I think there was like 260 different pieces of legislation that we have. So we never know what's gonna happen, right? Growth outstrips staff resources. Is that happening now?
Not yet, but it can.
It can, okay. Lack of workforce for growth. What do we mean by that? Are we talking about municipal workforce or local workforce, or both?
Yeah, that was
Local
mine,
for
and,
sure.
and local for sure. I mean, we hear it
Yeah.
from some of the industry now that they're having a hard time, filling all the jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, and the types of jobs as well, right? Yeah. School closures. So you told me the stories there. Yeah, so you have two schools. Are they in threat of being closed?
They were in the last round, and I believe if changes and new schools are built, they'll be back in that same mix again. Yeah.
Okay. Ottawa expansion very quickly. So is that a threat here? Why?
Yeah, I see it as a threat as we, we watch what's happening in Kemptville and how quickly that's going. And if it's just opinion, but if expansion on 43 doesn't happen, Kemptville's gonna outgrow itself. People are gonna continue coming into the township, and that expansion's gonna come a little quicker and than I think that we're ready for, or what we even think is possible.
Another couple of, obviously, on reduced funding, lack of employees for new businesses, so again, that's kind of this. Track war. Am I reading that right? Something more,
Not mine.
help me.
Trade wars.
Oh, trade wars. Yes, so how much is, that's gonna impact both local businesses, but also your ability to be able to purchase?
Affects agriculture big time, so.
For sure, absolutely. Major port issue, that's always a threat, right? You are on the border.
well, no, what I'm talking about there is if we have an explosion.
Yeah.
Ports are very susceptible to that kind of a disaster, that could certainly hurt things very, very badly here.
For sure, yeah, okay. Aging population again and services. But also, aging population is directly related to lack of workforce as well.
Yeah.
Union unrest, do you have a good union management, union
Well, we've
relationship?
had one of our major plants is, our ingredient, and there's a strong union in there, and they've had union unrest before, that we lost part of it one time, because the union strike dragged on so long, and
Yeah,
being that they're such a big international corporation now, if you get too much union unrest in a place, no matter how profitable a plant is, it doesn't take them long to snap their fingers and say, that's gone, so
Yep.
don't want to bother with it, so.
well, I was around in Smith, near Smith Falls when Hershey's left, so it's all.
Yes, there you go.
There you go.
It's taken
Now
we're-
30 years though to.
30 years to
rebound from
recover,
it.
that's right, it takes a long time. And cyber attacks, unfortunately, I actually teach people on social engineering, on cyber attacks. We've had clients that have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, so yes, we don't even know what they're capable of, so, very good. Okay, well, thank you, so we are, I've taken more time than I planned. So, a SWOT analysis is really helpful for us because we've been able to hear your thoughts, and it certainly is gonna help us build on the next part of the service delivery review. And when we meet with you individually, we'll start to, we still have some opportunities to talk about that as well, when we meet with you individually. And we're also gonna put together what we call the PESL, which is the political pieces, which will come from that. What's the economic factors impacting the township, the social factors, technology, environment, and legal issues, so that'll come from that. So just to wrap up for us, is the next steps are gonna be interviews. Like I said, now when you get an email from me, it's not spam.
They might go to that.
So hopefully, we can set something up. We are trying to get to you within the next couple weeks. Create that and validate the service inventory. We will do service walkthroughs. It's very important that staff be involved through this, so you develop through that, and then develop that high-level opportunities, which is gonna be the next time we see you. We're going to bring the findings report and give you an opportunity to look at that and provide some input, so. On that note, I'm just gonna open it to any questions. you might
Okay,
have.
any questions before we call the meeting to an end?
Just looking forward to the final result here.
We're looking forward to the process that gets us to the final result. So anyway, I'll thank you then, Tammy, for getting us through this first stage of it. And I know you're gonna be meeting with staff too, so
Absolutely.
thanks very much. I think it's been an interesting process here for us. I'm gonna proceed to wind this up. The next item on the agenda is question period. Any questions? Hearing none, does someone have the confirmatory bylaw for this meeting?
So second, Deputy Mayor Deschamps, a bylaw to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by resolution be now passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 2019-53.
First time.
Thank you very much. Those in favor?
Aye.
And does anyone have the motion to adjourn this special meeting?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Cameron, that the council does now adjourn at 4:53 PM.
Second.
5-minute break.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried.